This is the brand new Qantas A321XLR, one of only two currently flying here in Australia. Qantas have bet big on this aircraft with 48 new A321XLRs on order to replace their fleet of progressively aging Boeing 737-800s. But it's not just a simple swap, and the two aircraft are actually different in many ways, and Qantas are squeezing even more economy passengers onto the new A321XLRs. So what's the flight experience actually like? Should you specifically try and book the A321XLR if you are flying with Qantas in the future? And why exactly did Qantas choose the A321XLR to replace the very trusted and very reliable Boeing 737-800? Qantas are launching their new A321 on a couple of routes here in Australia. They're flying between Sydney and Perth, Sydney and Melbourne, and they've just launched a new Sydney to Brisbane leg as well. Now today I'm flying between here in Melbourne and Sydney, and I'm going to show you what both the economy and the business class legs are like. I'm flying up in economy and flying back again later this afternoon in business class. One thing I'm trying on this flight, which is new for Qantas, is they've launched in economy their new neighbour free seat option, which is not new for the airline industry as a whole. Several airlines already offer this, but it's basically where you can choose to pay a small fee to ensure that the seat next to you is free. So in economy, it gives you a little bit more room to kind of stretch out, especially on some of those longer flights. But the difference with what Qantas are offering is their neighbour free seat is not actually guaranteed. As they say on their website, they can allocate someone in that seat, even if you've paid your fee, for operational or safety reasons. Now, of course, if that happens, you get the fee refunded. It's an interesting concept. I've tried it today so I can show you how it actually works, and I don't know if the seat next to me will be free and whether I'm going to be charged until I turn up to the gate, or pretty much until I get onto the aeroplane. But they have launched it as an option, and it might be something you want to try. I just thought I'd show you what it's like in this video.
Like today, in-flight entertainment is available to stream on your own device via the free Qantas Entertainment app.
All right, so I've just boarded, and right now my seat next to me is currently free at the moment.
They're now just using the single runway there. As a result, Air Traffic Control have asked us to wait here for another 15 minutes or so before we get underway.
So I was chatting to a member of the cabin crew, and they were telling me that because this is physically a bigger aircraft, the boarding on the A321XLR compared to the 737 does take a little bit longer. And I'm wondering if that's why for this aircraft the gate opened 30 minutes before the departure time, whereas normally what Qantas do on a domestic flight between Melbourne and Sydney is they'll open the gate 20 minutes before. And I wonder if that will become like a sort of matter of course as they fly slightly bigger capacity aircraft on these domestic routes in the future. In terms of the seating on board, this aircraft does have capacity for 200 people to fly on board this aircraft. That's 20 in business class and 180 in economy. Compare that to the 174 that you could get on the 737, which was 12 in business class and 164 in economy. So there are physically more passengers on board this aircraft. What that means is that the seat has actually been made slightly bigger. So whilst it has the same gap between the seat in front, it's 30 inches pitch on this aircraft, which is the same as the 737. It's 17.6 inches wide as opposed to the 17.2 that you had on the seats on the 737.
We're just holding just to the north of Canberra at the moment. Air Traffic Control.
Now, as I'm sitting at the very back of the plane, this is the very last row, the one thing you will notice is next to me there's quite a queue for the toilets, and that's because, well, there are more people, as I've just mentioned, on this aircraft, but still the same number of toilets as you have on the 737. But I do believe that they are putting more toilets on board these A321s when they are going to be configured for the long haul flying. The design of the A321 seat here in economy it's fairly different from what you do have and what you would be used to if you've flown the 737s with Qantas. You've got a USB-C and USB-A outlet for charging, got the tray table that folds out in a similar way to the 737, but there is this pretty cleverly designed iPad and iPhone holder which just folds out. So because there's no seatback in-flight entertainment on this aircraft, so you connect to the Qantas in-flight entertainment system itself using their onboard Wi-Fi, which is available on every A321XLR, they've all got it, and then use your own device to view whatever you want to watch on their entertainment system. One other key difference between the 737 and the A321 is the A321's cabin is actually slightly wider. So what the designers have done on this aircraft is actually give passengers 60% more overhead baggage compartment space than you would have got on an aircraft like the 737. I think that's really going to come into play when this aircraft is used not so much on these shorter domestic hops, but when it really stretches its legs and goes international, because as you know, for people who are travelling sort of short haul international economy, which this aircraft will be used a lot for, the tendency is quite often to bring your cabin baggage on board and not actually check a bag in if you're only going for a short amount of time. I certainly try and do it whenever I can. So it's good to know on this new aircraft that there is actually more space in the overhead baggage compartment to be able to store bags for those sorts of flyers.
On behalf of Qantas, it's been a pleasure to have you on board. We look forward to supplying you all again soon. Thank you.
It is actually quite windy here in Sydney at the moment. I can see why they've only got that one runway working. So Sydney's got 3 runways. 2 of them are parallel and they go north-south. And those are the ones that most of the time you'll find you'll land at when you land at Sydney Kingsford Smith. But because we've got a very strong westerly wind at the moment, Sydney are basically only operating on the 1 east-west runway. So they've basically cut the capacity of Sydney International Airport down to 50%, which is causing quite a backlog of airplanes here in Sydney today. I thought I'd pick the most suspicious looking part of the airport to film this bit, like right by the perimeter fence. One of the key reasons I think Qantas chose the A321 obviously then is because they're already investing in Airbus in their fleet in general. They fly the A380. They've just recently brought on the A220 for some of their more shorter regional domestic routes. And as time goes on, Qantas are using Boeing aircraft seemingly less and less. Yes, they've got the 787 Dreamliner, but as we know, Project Sunrise is just around the corner and that's going to be operated using the A350 ultra long range, again, another Airbus aircraft. Now, I was lucky enough on that flight just now, I knew one of the pilots and I was chatting to the flight crew and they said the transition from the Boeing 737 to the Airbus A321XLR is actually really straightforward and the cockpit is a lot more spacious. There's a lot more automation though in the A321 and I think for some of the longer range flying that the flight crews are going to be doing in that aircraft, it's actually going to be an easier experience for the flight crew. That workload is going to be reduced. And anecdotally, and that's just talking to a couple of pilots on our flight from Melbourne into Sydney this morning, they said that's a big reason why they're actually really looking forward to flying the A321 as opposed to the 737. China Southern, off to China, obviously. If you look at the 2 aircraft side by side then, the A321 is physically longer than the Boeing 737. So the Boeing 737 is generally 39.5 metres long. The Airbus A320XLR is 44.5 metres long. The wingspan between the 2 aircraft, well, despite the increased length of the A321, the wingspans are actually the same, 35.8 metres. But the thing that's really interesting between these 2 aircraft, and I think probably the reason why Qantas have gone with the A321 moving forwards, apart from all the efficiency benefits of the new engines, etc., is the range. Now the A321, its kind of marketed range, its range on paper, is 3,000 kilometres further than the Boeing 737-800. And Qantas have got this cool graphic on their website which actually shows 2 rings, the inner ring being where the 737 could reach from some of its main popular airports in Australia. The outer ring though shows how much further the A321XLR can actually go. I mentioned the engines. There is a big difference between the 2 and it's basically just, it's a more modern engine on the A321. It has what's called a geared turbofan, which means that not everything is spinning at the same rate. Different components inside the turbofan, the jet engine itself, are actually spinning at different rates depending on the use case scenario at the current time of the engine. Whereas the 737 uses the older non-geared turbofan engine, the CFM56, which it is a great engine, don't get me wrong, and it's used in many, many aircraft around the world, but obviously the A321 has got access to newer technology and therefore for the same amount of fuel that you're burning, the A321 can be a lot more efficient. It's hard comparing the engines of the 2 because it's like saying, oh, the iPhone 16 is a lot better than the iPhone 11. Well, of course it is. I mean, the CFM56 I think came out in 1974. So that's older technology that's been used in the 737 but has been very, very reliable over the years. So obviously with a new aircraft like the A321, we get access to new engine technology which gives us all those additional efficiencies. Oh, Sydney's so windy today. No wonder they're on a single runway.
You are seated at an overwing exit, or row 1 in the business cabin.
There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows in business class here. Each row is a 2-2 configuration, so 2 more rows and 8 more business class seats on the A321 compared to the 737. Now the seat itself here is not actually that dissimilar to the one that you have on the 737. It's a manually reclining seat, so you push a button and push back on the chair to recline back. There's no electric recline. Like the economy seat, you have USB-A and USB-C charging, but the difference to economy here in business is you actually have 2 ports, one in the seat back in front of you and one in the armrest just down to your left hand side. And also down there, the other cool thing about this seat, which is new compared to Qantas's 737s, is wireless charging. Tray table comes out of the arm as usual, as you would expect. It unfolds into 2 panels. The thing I do like is it has got this little flip up metal bracket at the back of it, which is a cool place to prop your iPad on if you want to watch something whilst you're eating. I do have one little bugbear about this seat though, and that is that there is a footrest on it, which I think is a little bit unnecessary. I've actually found I've knocked my shins on it a couple of times already on this flight, and I think maybe it's a little bit of an unnecessary touch. I'd actually prefer not to have that footrest at all and just have a little bit of extra leg room for me to be able to stretch my legs out. One interesting thing I did note is that we weren't offered drinks when we sat down in the business class cabin. Now that could just be because this is a new aircraft and some of the staffing practices are still being worked out. Could be because there's more business class seats and to get drinks to everybody and then pick up all the glassware again before we take off. I'm not sure the reason why. I just know if you do travel business between Melbourne and Sydney on a 737, you do get offered a drink when you sit down on the A321. We didn't. Could just be this flight, but just worth noting. Like the economy seat, there's also a little table or a little panel that kind of folds down in the back of the seat in front of you, and a hook where you can put in your iPad or your iPhone, whatever you're using, to watch your in-flight entertainment, because again, there's no in-flight entertainment system built into the seat itself.
Welcome to Melbourne, where we recognise the traditional custodians and their connection to the country.
So whilst the overall number of seats on the A321 then has increased compared to the 737, they've actually done it in quite a smart way. The slightly larger cabin, the more overhead baggage space, and the fact that those economy seats are slightly wider and, to be honest, a bit more comfortable, I find, than the 737, means that apart from the additional wait time for people getting on and off the aircraft, you don't really notice the fact that there are more people on board the plane. Apart from, in my instance in this case, and again it could change with different configurations of the aircraft in the future, apart from maybe the toilet situation, because there are more people on the aircraft but the same number of toilets as the 737. That could potentially be problematic, especially on slightly longer flights if the configuration isn't changed. One thing I do hope though with the neighbour-free seat that Qantas have introduced is that they provide a guarantee on the A321 if they are going to be offering it. So if you do pay the fee to get the seat next to you free, that seat should be free next to you. It shouldn't be a lottery then as to whether Qantas can sell it at a higher price. But the tech benefits are clear. I think for pilots it's a nicer aircraft to fly, and I think that because there's more business class seats on board the aircraft as well, there's more likelihood that if you are going to go for a points upgrade, which is how I paid for my seat today, you've got more chance of getting it. So should you look out for the A321 if you get the choice to fly that instead of the Boeing 737 in the future? Well, yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. I think it's a great aircraft, and I look forward to seeing more of them arriving in the Qantas fleet over the next few months.